Hello, it's Rachel. Since most shows are on hiatus for the end of the year, I thought it might be fun to do a wrap up of sorts where I discuss some shows I really enjoyed that were canceled in 2022. And hopefully, I will convince anyone who watches this video to check one or multiple of them out. So, first, I want to discuss 4400 because it was by far my favorite show of the handful I'm going to discuss. 4400 was a science fiction show that aired on the CW about 4,400 people who disappeared from different periods in time and find themselves in 2021 Detroit, suddenly having powers. Upon their reemergence in the future, as some of these individuals have been missing for close to a century, the government is a bit nervous and decides to keep a close eye on these people. I know that's not that much information, but I feel like the less you know about this show going in, the better. So that's all I want to give away in terms of plot. So, doing my best to avoid spoilers, let me tell you why you should watch this show. So, firstly, the span of experiences. There's a black trans man who gets a very lovely romance. There's a prominent physically disabled character who, yes, is played by a disabled actress. There's three important sapphic characters, and just a very wide breadth of perspectives given these people were living in different decades. Like, there's a character who's around during the Harlem Renaissance. There's a character who participated in the civil rights movement in the 60s. There's a character who was stuck in a cult in the 90s. There's a character who was forcibly institutionalized in the 30s. And given that time period, he's not given any official diagnosis, but he is implied to be autistic. It's really incredible how many unique viewpoints coexist and interact with each other on this show, and it causes a lot of really fascinating conversations. There's also a lot of smart social commentary. The treatment of the 4400 is pretty obviously a commentary on ICE's inhumane treatment of immigrants. After the public becomes aware of the time travel aspect, many people consider the 4400 to be threats, and the show touches on how radicalization can happen and how people in power can manipulate others into fearing certain people. There's clashing of ideals, as many characters want to improve the lives of the 4400, but there are no agreements as to how to accomplish that. If you're a sci-fi fan, I truly cannot recommend this show enough. And if you only feel up to checking out one of the 7 shows I'm going to discuss, I really urge you to choose this one. But as I said, I don't want to spoil things, so I'm going to leave it there and move on to the next show. Now, since I started with a CW show, I might as well discuss the 2 other CW shows on my list. Around the time 4400 wrapped up its run, Naomi premiered. Naomi was a superhero show, and if you're a Superman fan, it'll probably sound pretty familiar to you. Naomi has grown up thinking that she is a human until there's a supernatural incident and she starts to manifest powers, quickly learning she is from another planet. Basically, the season is about Naomi learning how to control her powers and how keeping the secret that she's an alien affects her relationships. In terms of narrative, there's not really anything revolutionary going on, and while I saw a handful of the twists coming, I thought they were still satisfying to watch unfold. The main reason I want to recommend this show is Casey Walfall was incredible as Naomi. I think her performance alone makes the show worth checking out. I believe she was only 17 when she was working on the show, and she is just breathtaking to watch. Like, I need her to land another lead role immediately because she just hit everything she needed to hit perfectly. Another reason to check it out, minor spoilers since this is revealed in the pilot, there are a few other aliens on the planet as well, and one of them becomes Naomi's mentor. And this dynamic that this character had with Naomi was literally everything to me. Like, genuinely maybe my favorite student-mentor dynamic of all time. Found families remain my lifeblood, what can I say? And while I have a love-hate relationship with superhero content centering on kids, because, like, what is the obsession with children putting themselves in danger for the world? Like, it's a little weird. It's veering into child soldier territory a little bit. But I think this show does a better job than most in this genre because it really delves into her relationship with her friends most of the adults in Naomi's life are only interested in her training as a way to protect herself and not as a way to become a vigilante, like many other stories focused on a superpowered teenager would be. Also, the friend group is super cute. If you've been wanting a teen drama where the teens feel like real teens instead of like a hyper dramatic and hypersexual atmosphere that a lot of popular current teen dramas have, then you might enjoy this. Now, as for the final CW show I want to discuss, it's Batwoman. Now, I can't speak to the first season because I never sat down and watched it. Like, I literally decided to check out the show upon hearing Javicia Leslie was taking the role for season 2. But if you've seen any other CW superhero shows, it's pretty much the same formula. Like, there's the weekly bad guy who has some kind of dangerous tech or some kind of special powers, and in this case, Batwoman has to stop them. So, really nothing groundbreaking in terms of the formula. But the best thing about Batwoman is that it gave me two badass black lesbians who are able to be emotionally vulnerable with each other. Like, we had a story of two black women who went from barely trusting each other to reluctant allies to genuine friends who confide in each other to lovers. What other show can say that? And watching their relationship play out was so exquisite, and I don't know when another female-female romance will come along and reach the same level of excellence, because Sophie and Ryan were top tier. As it's a Bat fam story, Batwoman gets a sidekick in season 3, leading to a very well executed story about that character's PTSD. There's also a very cool Poison Ivy storyline where another character gets infected by Pamela's vine and she inherits those powers as well. Although I will admit the resolution of that storyline is not what I had hoped for. There was also a really compelling through line between seasons 2 and 3 of what these characters are willing to do for their families, both biological and chosen. And this leads to some really nice surprises in the second half of season 3. There's so much more I want to praise about the show, but I don't want to spoil anything else, so I'll cut myself off. Also, heads up that if you do decide to check out Batwoman, the show is unfortunately pretty ableist. Most of the villains are labeled as mentally ill, including the main antagonist of the show, and it is tiring, to say the least. Obviously, I think the positives outweigh this very glaring negative, but I completely understand if other people don't feel this way. Next up is The Man Who Fell to Earth. This show is about an alien who comes to Earth in the hope of creating a power source to save his dying planet. Now, this is a little bit different from the other shows on this list because I'm not sure if the show was ever meant to get more than one season, but it is so incredibly well crafted, and I'm desperate for more people to watch it, so I couldn't not include it. So, Faraday, as an alien from Anthea, has to learn about humans and humanity as he interacts with people, namely Justin, the woman who is helping him create this power source. One of the things I really loved about the world building of this show is that Antheans don't experience emotions in the same way that humans do. So a lot of emotions are new for Faraday, such as grief and regret and joy, and the longer he stays on Earth, the more human he becomes, being able to experience these emotions firsthand. Seeing Faraday bond with Justin and her family was so beautiful and expertly written. Like, this is a story that we've seen many, many times before, but the execution was just perfect. Chiwetel Ejiofor and Naomi Harris were incredible as Faraday and Justin, respectively. I wish they would get awards for their work on this show because they truly deserve it. This is another show where the less you know going in, the better, so I really don't want to say much. If you like a story that will keep you on your toes, this is definitely a great one to choose. The lore is intricate and fascinating. It's very fast paced. My expectations and predictions were constantly turned upside down in like the best possible way. Um, I will say, along with Batwoman, this show had issues with ableism, and also there was some like police brutality in the first episode that I feel did not need to be as explicit as it was. But overall, I consider this a must-watch if you're a sci-fi fan, especially if you like sci-fi that leans heavily into the science. Next is Rutherford Falls. This was an extremely underrated comedy show about an indigenous tribe suing to get land back from the grandson of the town's namesake. This show is so clever and does a fantastic job at pointing out microaggressions towards indigenous people. The three main characters are Nathan Rutherford, Terry Thomas, and Reagan Wells. Now, in my opinion, Nathan was pretty irritating in the first season because he was very caught up in defending his family name, and that would sometimes cause friction between him and Reagan. Thankfully, he mostly gets over that in season 2, and the narrative gives Terry and Reagan way more opportunity to shine. The writing for Terry and Reagan makes it very obvious that Indigenous creatives worked on the show behind the scenes, which makes their stories so much richer. While I could dissect the show episode by episode to explain why you should check it out, I'll just bring my attention to one of my favorite episodes from season 2. So, spoilers for the episode Adirondack season 3, but this episode is pretty self contained, so it's not going to have any details about plot lines outside of this episode. Terry and Reagan are invited to the set of a fictional show in Adirondack. The showrunners hired Terry and Reagan as consultants to give feedback on the show's depiction of the Minnesota Nation. Reagan has multiple objections, which Terry tries to brush aside at first, but when he also becomes bothered by the insensitive handling of Minnetonka traditions and he expresses his concern, the showrunners ignore them. This leads to Terry feeding the showrunners false information so that the result will be so offensive as to tarnish the reputation of the show. I love it. Terry is such a genius. I miss him so much. Like, Terry and Reagan are genuinely two of my favorite sitcom characters ever, and they deserved better than only 2 seasons. I'm so sad. Another comedy show that was lost after its second season was Woke. Woke was about a black man who works as a cartoonist, and he's known for keeping his art free of any overtly political content, until one day he has a traumatic experience when he is racially profiled by cops. Now, I completely understand if hearing that this is the premise, that it turns you away from the show. While this is an inciting incident for the main character, Keith, and this instance of police brutality is handled with care, I completely understand why such a topic might feel too heavy for a viewer. To balance some of the more bleak material the show engages with, there's an aspect of surrealism and absurdity. After the incident, Keith starts imagining inanimate objects speaking to him, frequently prodding him to be bolder and more outspoken. As you might expect, given the setup, the show is pretty staunchly anti-cop, which is a rarity and very much appreciated when most current media is pretty aggressively pro-cop. The show also is very critical of capitalism, and season 2 talks in depth about unhoused individuals. While it is by no means perfect, Woke is one of the more radical pieces of media I've consumed, and while I wish there had been more, I'm very glad that these 2 seasons exist. Lastly, I want to mention The Endgame. Honestly, the show is pretty formulaic in its setup. It's about a criminal mastermind who insists on working only with an agent that they have a personal history with. The cat and mouse games that they manage to play while this mastermind is even imprisoned. But I enjoyed the show quite a bit. The acting was great. There were a few really good twists, especially in the final 2 or 3 episodes. I really don't have much to say about this one because it really was just like fun and an easily digestible watch. Also, for anyone who has a thing for lady villains, you'll love Elena. Like, I'm a known villain hater most of the time, like probably 90% of the time, and I adored her. I'm confident she would have become iconic if the show had been given a longer run. Anyway, if you made it to the end of this, thank you so much. I hope at least one of these shows piqued your interest because I think they're all a great watch. But if none of them did, then an extra thank you for listening all the way through. Hope you have a wonderful end of the year and that you're staying safe, given we are still in a pandemic, and unfortunately, it seems like many people want to act like we are not. Hopefully, I will catch you again in 2023. Bye.